Merry Meet, Annie here. Welcome back to my series on making Kyphi incense. We are actually going to begin the 13 days of the compounding of Kyphi. And I wanted to begin that by speaking a little bit about the mortar and the pestle. And I have been very blessed this year that I have been able to get something I've wanted in a long, long time, which is a very large granite vessel. And this is new to me, and I'm going to treasure this. I can already tell working with this how much I'm going to enjoy it. It's solid granite and it's very heavy. I wanted it for a couple of reasons. For when I was making incense batches that were larger, because I was going to share them, or if I were making a large batch of temple incense for my coven. I have a lot of little mortar and pestles, but I didn't have something substantial like she is. So I am one happy witch that I was able to gift myself with this. And I wanted to talk, as we began to talk about Kyphi and the compounding of Kyphi, about the importance of the mortar and the pestle. The mortar and the pestle is a witch's tool. All of the witch's tools, which are the most important witch's tools, are those which come from the most mundane aspects of our life and our history. And an indentation in a stone with a larger stone to grind in it is part of our history. For my woman viewers, of course, it is very, very much a part of our history. But to our gentleman viewers, especially when it comes to the time of the early pharmacists and apothecaries and the compounding of herbs into medicines, this is a very important symbol, so we can all relate to it. But this is actually also a sacred tool, and one of my witch's tools, which I would count up there right along with my blade, my mirror, my patent, and any other of those so-called formal tools. This is amongst them, as is every mortar and pestle I've ever taken hand to do work with. So let's talk a little bit about the mortar and the pestle. A lot of symbolism with the mortar and the pestle, no least the which is the idea of the male and the female, the phallic symbol of the pestle, the womb of the mortar. So for those of us like myself who are traditionally Wiccan and honor God and Goddess, the symbolism of the male and the female, both the mundane and the divine, as seen in our mortar and pestle, is truly an aid to our magical workings. This energy right here, is the same energy of the chalice and the blade. Similar energy also to the male and female energies combined in our brooms and our besoms. Very powerful symbol of witchcraft. Witchcrafts tie into the mundane, the way we live our lives, the normal things that are part of our lives, in addition to the magical things we make happen, the transformations we own, that we can make happen. This is a vessel of transformation. We could call it magic. When we add our intent to what we work with, manifest change out of that, the mundane and the magical. Most of us who work with botanicals, herbs, resins, we have several different kinds of mortar and pestles. I do too. I have two small granite ones that I use, one for dry ingredients and one for resins, and I have a fairly deep wooden one that I use because I love holding that one in my hand. It's a very comfortable one to use and hold. And it was bought in a kitchen store, probably even something simple like a grocery store if I remember correctly. Even to this day, these symbols can be part of our kitchen and that beautiful physical everyday life that we live. And then they can become a magical tool. Now the only thing I've slipped into my collection of mortar and pestles over the years is I do have a very heavy spice grinder. One of those terribly noisy electric gadgets. I have a little problem sometimes nowadays with older person's hands and with the joint problems that come with lupus of working very hard with something that has to be broken down, say a resin that's particularly stubborn. Now we do know that there's a trick too, working with those kinds of resins, which is of the modern world, which is putting them in our freezer for the night, and then they break a lot easier. But I still on occasion have problems, and we'll resort to using my electronic spice chopper to get something down to a smaller size that I can manipulate better. Not for Kyphi. Not for Kyphi. Kyphi needs to be manipulated by hand with nothing electric touching it. And that is where this new vessel will come in handy. So let's talk about when you get a new mortar and pestle. The question I have received from some who've watched my incense making videos is, what do you do to bless it? Like you do the other tools. We know that we all have ways in which we welcome new tools into our life and make those tools known to our gods. The mortars I have found want to be blessed simply by their use. You can see that when I work with mine, I have this little mini column I've had for a long, long time that just happens to fit perfectly between my legs, like a potter's wheel would be, something that's intimate and I can hold close. And even when I work with my little mortar and pestles, I like to put them on this poor beat up old surface. So my new one fits on there quite nicely and is a very comfortable position within to work. As I mentioned, mortars like to have you bond to them simply by being with them and using them. Whether you are using a mortar for a cooking purpose, a new one you brought into your house, or you brought it in specifically to use for blending your herbs or making your incenses, they do like to be seasoned. And my grandmothers were very, very picky about the seasoning of their new mortars when they brought them into the kitchen. I use the technique they used, which is when I get a new mortar, I fill it pretty strong with rice, raw rice, and I then spend time seasoning that new mortar with the rice, which means really getting into there and taking against the edges. A couple of things happen. The rice fill in the crevices of the mortar, and they take away any bits of stone that may have been loose but not quite broken off of to make the mortar filled with the essence of the rice. And you can also then refresh your mortars at any point that perhaps you've worked with a particularly gooey resin. And when you've taken it out and you then have a bit of a mess inside your mortar, take your rice, put it in, and then spend some time with it. Spend some time with it, and then you will be able to refresh and re-season your mortar. My experience has been that this is all one needs to devote oneself and bond oneself to the mortar if one is using it as a spiritual tool. This particular mortar, which I've had about a week, I immediately put the rice in, and I have spent time every day with her, seasoning her. And then I took advantage of the fact that at the dark moon this past week, the dark moon, the ladies of my coven get together, just the girls, and I took advantage of their presence to have each of them take a little bit of time with the mortar. That way, the energy of some of the women I adore most in this world became part of this very feminine vessel. This vessel's in season now for a week, so it's time for me to take the rice out of it and proceed with the first step of making Kyphi, which is the addition of frankincense to the mixture. So please stay tuned for the next video when we will begin the first of 13 nights of compounding the Kyphi mixture. For now, I bid you mirth and reverence, and I will be back to you in a short period of time with the next video in this series.